Hi, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andrew Moloney from Kickdrum Partners. Uh, Today, we're going to be diving into an interesting subject, something that's been top of my mind, certainly of late, which is how to choose the best CRM if you're a B2B business. Now, joining me today, I'm really pleased to say that I have Jess Sprinkel joining us, who is an expert in this area. Jess, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the folks about you and Sponge.io?
Hi, thanks for having me, Andrew. I run a RevOps agency called Sponge.io. We're on the eastern part of the US, and we work with a lot of B2B, mostly tech companies that are looking to improve their sales and marketing operations.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm really pleased you could join us because while I know a reasonable amount about CRMs and at any moment in time I'm probably using three or four, this is really an area I think that's incredibly complicated. And I guess it's probably the reason that Sponge.io exists, right? Because for many companies, this is really a tricky thing, both to select the right CRM, but then also to manage it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's funny because the CRM has often been kind of in the sales domain, but as we both know, that's where all of the reporting lives, or a lot of the reporting lives from a revenue standpoint. So it's increasingly become kind of part of the marketing territory that they want to make sure that they understand the capabilities and how the data is structured so that they can, showcase their efforts and how they are performing and driving the bottom line.
Brilliant. I think that's an area we definitely need to get into. So just to reiterate, the thing we really want to focus on today is that part of the market which is about business to business, probably at complex sales and marketing motions. Lots of influencers, big deals, long sales cycles, that kind of thing, and how you start to separate between I think I saw a report that said there's something like 1,200 different CRM platforms that are out there now. How do you actually choose between them? Because just looking at a laundry list of features, I know for many people is just too daunting, and it's really hard to separate, what should be important to you. And that's, I think, maybe what we focus on today.
Yeah.
I'm thinking in 20 minutes of talking, we can probably help people, just guide them to what they should be thinking about, and maybe even throw in a few examples of where certain CRM platforms are better or worse. I think. What do you think? Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
could
That
work?
sounds great. That sounds great.
Awesome, awesome. So maybe we should start by actually defining what on earth the CRM actually is and what it does. Do you want to take a stab at that? And
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so CRM, of course, means customer relationship management. And so that is the primary database that the sales team, the marketing team, often the finance team, and also the customer success or the customer service support teams are using. And so that is where we capture all of the data about our leads that are engaging in our marketing campaigns, of course, then how our BDR teams might be working those leads, reaching out to them and trying to book meetings, how the sales team is creating and working opportunities and logging deals, and then potentially also how we are logging cases, working cases from the customer support side of the spectrum. So it really is a system that goes across all of the lines of business within a B2B tech company, where you are, trying to service your customers and keep track of what they're engaging with and how they are communicating with us as a company.
And I think, certainly to my mind, that's kind of where the first maybe misconception and the first decision point is going to be key, right? Because as you said, CRM isn't just about marketing, in fact, and it's not just about sales potentially. So, in terms of, and maybe it's about scale, I don't know. How do you decide which of those elements between sales, between marketing, customer service, are the right ones for your business to focus on? Would you say?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on how mature and where you are in that scale and in terms of the requirements that you are looking for. So if you are a startup and maybe you have one or two salespeople, maybe there's not even a marketing team in place yet, maybe the service is actually happening through the sales team, or maybe you have one or two dedicated support people. your requirements are going to be a lot different than a company that has an established sales team, an established BDR team, established marketing
Right.
team, in terms of just the complexity of the data that we're going to need to be able to track. And so there are, I don't think it's any surprise that Salesforce.com is the big player in this space. And it is a great platform, has a lot of extensibility and a lot of different features, but you may not be in that place where you need all of that. You might not need the ability to do a lot of custom automation or things like that. So I think being clear on where you are at in your revenue journey, where you think you're going to go in the next 2 to 3 years, and then getting clear on what are the most important pain points that you're trying to solve for before you start doing demos with a lot of these platforms.
And that's important. I think, how do you decide whether to choose something that fits what you need today versus
Yeah.
what you think you're going to need in, let's say, T+2 years or T+5 years? I mean, the level of pain, let's call it, from moving
Yeah.
from one platform to another probably shouldn't be underestimated. But equally, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce is probably at the higher end of what these
Yes.
platforms can cost you. So you could be spending a lot of money needlessly if you kind of overspec, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. We always recommend thinking about like a 3-year time horizon, because that'll give you enough time that you're not going to be migrating from platform to platform every year, because it is an effort, as you're saying. Um, Anyone who's been through an M&A activity and has done the work of consolidating systems and migrating marketing platforms or sales platforms, it is at least a 3, 4, 5 month endeavor. So it's not something you want to be doing every year. And so we
Sure.
like to be thinking in a 3-year time frame, which does mean that if you are on the smaller side, but let's just say you're a VC-backed company and you're anticipating revenue growth of 50% year over year, you will be a much different company in 3 years. So thinking through your requirements and what you think you might need 3 years from now is a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. And I guess there's always, certainly in my experience, there's a tension between what sales need, if you like, and what marketing need. Because again, some platforms I think favor or are more sophisticated around helping you manage a complex sales
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
Others are very much more marketing led. And
yeah.
I'd say probably because maybe that stems from a kind of a B2C type focus versus B2B, that it tends to be more geared towards marketing capabilities. I don't know. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say in our experience, usually it is the sales team that is driving any sort of CRM decision, and depends on the company how involved the marketing and finance and support teams are in that decision. I think the
Interesting.
better outcomes are when you have, all of those stakeholders at the table,
Right.
to make sure that everyone is accounted for. Um, and it really depends. Like you said, there are some platforms that are kind of marketing first and then sales and support second. Other platforms, like I would say Salesforce is a very sales centric
For
platform.
sure. For
And
sure.
then, marketing and support, you're often perhaps using integrations like Marketo, HubSpot, to be that marketing automation platform. You might also be using things like Zendesk or other tools that are really more meant for customer support and case management, to kind of bolt on to that. So that's something to keep in mind, is if you are going to go with a more expensive platform, do you have even more additional costs, because you want to have more function specific tools that you're going to be using. On the other side of the spectrum, you might have tools like HubSpot or Pipedrive, that are a little bit more oriented towards like kind of scrappy startup mentality. We
Yeah.
use HubSpot ourselves as a CRM as well as a marketing automation platform, and it does the job great. It's very user friendly. It has both kind of the marketing like outreach component as well as the deal management CRM aspects to it. But where it maybe falls shorter, something to think about is just in terms of the extensibility. If you have a lot of complex automation, if you have like, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year deals, if your pricing structure is a little bit more complicated, if you have complex account hierarchies that you're trying to sell to, if you're really focusing on the large enterprise, but you also have different lines of business within, GE, for example, that you are selling into, and you want to structure your accounts in that way. If you have a lot of like deal automation that you are trying to do, that is, quite unique, you might kind of run into some issues where HubSpot tries to make it easy and out of the box. But of course, with simplicity, you kind of trade on customization.
I think you hit on a really interesting point, actually. Well, two points, especially when you mentioned HubSpot. Certainly in my experience, for many B2B businesses in the kind of organizations that we both deal with, in the tech sector or even beyond, just in the kind of large enterprise or large transaction sizes, you might not be dealing with thousands of contacts in your CRM or tens of thousands of contacts. It might be actually a relatively small number, but you need a deep sophistication in understanding that. I think, like you mentioned, I think Salesforce is a good example of one that came out the box thinking in those terms. Am I selling direct? Am I selling through the channel? Do I have territories? Who's a buyer? Who's an influencer? And building out those account teams and those kinds of capabilities. Salesforce is very good at all of that, but there's a price and actually a complexity associated with that
there
as well.
is.
And we should talk about complexity as well.
I think it's an important point that maybe some people underestimate that, like I was saying with HubSpot, there's a lot out of the box and it is simple. Maybe you kind of give up some of the flexibility to customize HubSpot as a platform because a lot of stuff is done out under the hood and it just kind of is the way that it is. But it is very easy to set up and easy to use. On the other side of the spectrum, you have something like Salesforce where it is a platform in like the truest sense of the word, meaning like here is the bottom, but like in order to like build the machine that you want it to actually be, there is a level of customization that is kind of required to make it fit that your business, your sales cycle, your sales process. And so it is a system that is a little bit, it just requires more maintenance and more upkeep to make sure that it's working for you.
We mentioned HubSpot and Salesforce quite a lot, and you mentioned Pipedrive as just three of many examples.
Of course, yes.
But what strikes me is that maybe another important consideration that you need to think about is your level within your own organization, your level of comfort with any of these platforms already based on the people you have, and your comfort level in trying to support a particular platform and configure it and utilize it every day. Because I think when you go out of, the top 10, let's say, platforms, it then becomes incredibly hard to find good integrations or good people that can support you externally. And also, within your own organization, you won't have marketers or salespeople who necessarily have used these platforms before and jump in already to use them. I've certainly seen that, and I've been on the other end of it as well, joining businesses or supporting businesses who are using platforms that nobody had ever heard of. Nothing integrates with it. And you're kind of on your own, and if the support from that business isn't great, you've got a problem. So I think that's an important piece as well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's pretty well known that the salespeople don't like any system. And so it's an uphill battle for, adoption and making sure that we're following the same process and that we all have full visibility into the sales process. So thinking through how is it going to be the easiest sales user experience so that we can't, because that's the whole point, right, is to be able to get visibility into how are we engaging our prospects and customers, what is resonating with them, how are we moving transactions. And so the data is only as good as it is in the system. And so making sure that we're working with a platform that the sales team is going to want to use, and that the support team is going to want to use, and the marketing team is going to want to use. If we're just going to buy something that no one's actually going to use, and we're still going to work on our spreadsheets over here, and we're uploading data at the end of the quarter whenever we need to get our reports together, that doesn't really help anybody.
No, absolutely. Now, just thinking about it slightly differently, why don't we think about, or maybe help people spot some of those, maybe those features that look on the surface like they should be an absolute thing. Oh, I definitely want that. But actually, in reality, in your experience, you find people never use them, or they're too hard to use, or the value that's derived from trying to configure this whizzy feature is actually not really valuable. So that maybe also in that, sorry, I'm throwing 2 or 3 questions at you, but also in my experience, some of these CRMs, when you look at the cost structure, and you did touch on it earlier, and the pricing, the way they price them, you might end up locked into something that gets very expensive very quickly. And how do you spot that? And what are the other kind of um, examples of that, of kind of some of the pitfalls, if you like, of some of those kind of platforms? You can name and shame if you want. I'll leave that up to you.
In terms of pricing structures, so the main way that CRM's price is based on database size. So
Right.
thinking through how many accounts am I targeting, how many people within those accounts am I targeting, yeah, that should be kind of like 101 before you start getting demos and everything. Like, let's have an idea of what that volume looks like, and do we anticipate that changing over time? Do we have kind of a defined universe that these are the companies and these are the people that we're selling to, and our job is to just knock on every single door and get as much of the lion's share as we can? Or are we in a more exploratory mode, and we're kind of trying still to find like product market fit, and maybe we're focusing on healthcare today, but there are other verticals and other companies and other geographies that we might target later on, in which case we have more room to increase the database size over time, and really look at the platforms that what that might look like, because we don't want to be locked into a system and then find out, oh shoot, it's going to be 3x the cost next year, once I get some traction and now are going to be fighting against these other verticals. No one wants to be in that position. So I think thinking through what that looks like is a good idea. The other way that CRM's price is based on storage. And so to a lesser extent, you want to think about how much data am I actually storing within the CRM, or how much data am I going to be pushing out to a data warehouse, which might be cheaper for that data storage. So things like custom objects, things like files, things like
Video.
my analytics, yeah, videos, like call
Videos.
recordings, all of that stuff. Am I actually saving that within the CRM, or am I pushing that elsewhere, or am I keeping it for a certain period of time and then dumping it? Because storage can get big quick. And so really thinking through upfront, what am I going to be using the CRM for? Because I have seen companies where, yeah, sure, of course, get it all in Salesforce. Like, that's where everybody is. And then you get into this position where we've used all of our storage, and now Salesforce is knocking on your door to sell you more stuff. So definitely worth thinking about upfront, so that you can kind of think through it. In terms of your first question around what features do people think that like are kind of like snazzy and shiny, that maybe they don't actually need, the one that comes to mind is chatter.
Okay.
Yeah, I all the time feel like sales teams think that they're going to be like collaborating within the CRM, on the opportunity record or on the contact record. And I mean, I've worked with, I don't know, probably close to 100 companies at this point. I have never seen a company that is actually doing more communication in the CRM than they are, in Slack or Teams or over email. It's just, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe eventually we will get there, but I'm not seeing it.
I don't know. Every platform wants to be the platform that you center your business around, right? Whether
Right,
it's
of
Slack
course.
or yeah, and so everyone's vying for that. And what actually happens is you end up with half a dozen different channels, and it's all fragmented.
Exactly. Yes, it's
But
everywhere now.
yeah, chat, interesting one, interesting one.
How about you?
Okay,
What features have you seen in your work that are shiny
well,
but not actually utilized?
yeah, well, I think it's for me, it's some of the integrations around website and
Yeah,
how much you want to monitor where people are, how their dwell time on a particular page and all of that stuff, which in a consumer business is super
yeah,
important. Right? If you're an e-commerce consumer business, that's really important. When you have a complex sales cycle and people are trying to refer to technical information, let's say, or they might just need to research a lot, the overall time they're spending on your site could be interesting, but more sophisticated than that, maybe for many businesses. There are lots of businesses that only have 100 customers, let's say,
yeah,
or
yeah,
even less, and are multi-million-dollar businesses.
yeah.
Do how much of that intelligence is really actionable and useful to me, uh, when most of it is about my relationship with that business rather than my digital relationship with that business. So that
Yeah,
I'm not caution that you shouldn't do that, but I wouldn't over focus on that. I don't think.
I think that brings up
In
a
that,
good point around like analytics maturity in general. Because I do think some people, it's very easy to kind of bite off more than you can chew on the analytics side. And that's an
right.
easy upsell for the CRM team. So, like, get this advanced analytics package, or, with Salesforce Analytics, HubSpot has an analytics package as well. Marketo has Visible. There are a lot of like upgrades that you could like talk yourself into because it's just kind of bundled in there and it looks like it's a good price, but actually it's more
Mm,
than you would pay for just the CRM itself. And I do think, of course, reporting is vitally important. But are you in the position where you need to be doing multi-touch attribution, or like what you're talking about, advanced web analytics?
yeah.
Are you at that point yet? Or are you going to be well served by just focusing on the basics in like the standard dashboards and reports? And then once you have that foundation, then you can think about more advanced analytics from there.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate what you said kind of near the beginning, that your timeline for thinking about those things is probably about 3 years. That's probably, you wouldn't want to refresh or change a platform any sooner than that, certainly.
Yeah,
Uh, but when you're thinking in that context, what's my business strategy for the next 3 years? What
right,
markets, what verticals, how sophisticated is my business? How big is it? How complicated is it? And
right,
similarly, my channels to market, my customers, all those things. It could be very different in 10 years. So don't plan for 10 years, plan
right.
for 3. So I think that's a really important point that you made. Another interesting one for me. So obviously, Kickdrum, we work with many businesses on a fractional basis. We provide that fractional people aspect to extend your marketing or biz dev capability, especially out here in Europe and across Europe. But your specialism is about being the outsourced marketing operations, sales operations capability, right?
Yeah,
So, so explain maybe at what point do you tend to get brought in? When do people decide I actually need a specialist in this area? When should they come to you versus start hiring internally? What's kind of the sweet spot for how that kind of evolves?
yeah. So for us, a good place for us to enter is when there is enough complexity that there's some chaos. And so either the sales team and the marketing team are like not quite jiving, or they're looking at a set of numbers, we're looking at a set of numbers, or we think the process is this and the handoffs are not clean. If there's some level of, or we can't get any reporting because we're not really sure what's going on, if there's some level of chaos, that you are like scratching your head like, what the heck, like we got to be able to figure this out.
Mm,
That's when it's a good time to bring in someone who has done this before, who knows what a clean sales and marketing operation looks like, feels like, functions, and can help you get on the same page. Because often, it's a bit cliche, but often it is a lack of alignment between the sales and marketing teams in terms of what is the lead management process, what are the goals that we are going to set to make sure that sales has enough pipeline to work and to meet their revenue and revenue goals. And so just getting back to the basics in terms of what is marketing bringing to the table? What does a qualified lead look like? Who's it going to get assigned to? How are they going to work it? What does a deal like? What is the qualification to create an opportunity? How are we going to work an opportunity to close? Often that's like, we need to start there. If you do have that sorted out and you're like, actually, our sales process is kind of complicated, and the way the CRM was set up to work out of the box is not working for us, that can also be a place where we might enter, is if there needs to be some more unique automation in place to make it easier. If the sales team is doing a lot of like repeat manual labor, that's just wasting a lot of time, then we can help automate some of that processing to give them more time back.
Makes sense. I mean, even for us, obviously we're a team of marketing experts. That's kind of what we do. We operate across all these different CRMs with different customers. And obviously we're pretty proficient at using those different platforms, as you might expect. But even for us, there's a point at which we call in the experts, and to help us or help our customers get to the place they need to be, with a bit more sophistication and a lot more experience across, trying to solve some of these knotty problems. Because if you're not getting true value out of one of these platforms, it's a very expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive. And like I said, there's no value in having something that is just sitting there and then ultimately people are doing workarounds or still maintaining their spreadsheets or their whiteboards even off to the side. So it is, if you are going to invest in a CRM, I think it is worthwhile to invest in making sure that it's actually working for your company. And then in terms of, back to your previous question around like, when does it make sense to like maybe hire a full-time sales ops or marketing ops person? I would say you can get along pretty well working with freelancers or contractors. If you've got like 10 to 15-ish hours a week of work, or if you know that you are doing a migration, using someone to do that. But then you need to think about if you are going to have ongoing maintenance and requests, and you need someone for the salespeople or the marketing people to go to kind of make the systems continue to work, then that might be when you think about hiring an ops person full time.
Good call. Good call. We're almost out of time. So maybe a couple of final thoughts from each of us, and before we wrap up. I'll go first to give you a chance to have a think.
Go for it.
I would say, for me, and I've seen this, with clients who had no CRM, built a very successful multi-million-dollar business with no CRM at all. I think those days are probably numbered, and I think the upside of having any CRM is worth, it's worth investing the time and the effort to put any CRM in place, even if it's the simplest, cheapest one you can find, just to start building up the data, the contacts, understanding who you're talking to and when you talk to them, even and have the ability to communicate with them in a more structured way, via email or WhatsApp now sometimes, or SMS or whatever it happens to be. I think it's absolutely important now for everybody to get something in place. So don't be put off. Just start. Start somewhere, because it's a lot easier to start, in the early days than it is to kind of retrofit something and try and pull everything back together out of wherever that disparate information is going forward. So I'd say definitely start. Definitely reach out to experts like us and like Jess, and we're often very very happy just to give you some pointers in the way we're doing on this video now. Jess,
definitely. I would probably just echo my earlier comment around making sure that all of the people that are going to use this CRM, if you've already decided you want a CRM and you need a CRM, or maybe you have one and you're thinking about changing it up and moving to a different one, I would get the stakeholders all together from marketing, sales, customer support, BDR, and just with a blank sheet of paper, have each of those functions write down what is it that they're trying to do. Kind of going back to the like old school like use cases, like, and with a again blank sheet of paper, try and identify like what those use cases are, and then go out and survey and demo a bunch of the CRMs that you might be considering. They will give you additional use cases that like they see often with their customers, and you can benchmark those against the ones that you think are most important for your organization,
Right.
and then have a chat internally about what seems to match up well. If you go into the demos, they will tell you what you need, which may or may not be what you actually need. So I would do that exercise up front. And I do definitely always advocate for having more than just sales a part of the conversation. They don't need to necessarily be driving the investment in the project, but they should have a seat at the table because it will be a system that other teams beyond just sales uses to do their daily work.
Good shout. Brilliant. Now, I know that you've got a bunch of resources, and depending on where people are watching this, they might be in the comments below or attached to the video in some other way. But also, obviously, there's lots of resources on both our websites too around these kinds of topics, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of blog posts on our website, sponge.io/blog. You can chat, you can click on any of the categories like sales operations, marketing analytics, whatever, for information on this topic. I think we do have a couple of head-to-head articles about, Salesforce versus HubSpot, HubSpot versus Marketo, if you were looking at specific platforms. So have a look at those. And yeah, let us know if we can help.
Brilliant. I think that was really useful, Jess. Thank you for agreeing to do this. Hopefully, people that stuck with us and had a listen got some value from us focusing in on just that kind of B2B tech sector and what's required in that space.
Yeah.
And with that, I'd like to say thank you again, and look forward to working with you again in the future.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for putting this together, and thanks for inviting me on.
A
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jess. Bye bye.